The Cold Within is a narrative poem written in the 1960s by James Patrick Kenny, an American poet. It is a seemingly simple poem about the six people around the dying fire, but it has a universal, profound moral. Thus, it is a parable. It inspires us to rise above the petty barrier about class, caste, religion, and race, and promote the concept of universal brotherhood. It teaches us that if we do not share the resources we have, then in the end, we all are going to suffer. The poet makes us ponder the concept of sins and makes us realize that anger, envy, prejudice, miserliness, and materialistic are in fact not merely vices but sins that will destroy us if we do not check them. Now let us look at the summary of the poem. The six humans were trapped by happenstance. They were sitting around the dying fire, and each of them has logs of wood. But none of them wanted to give up their logs and revive their dying fire. This is because they all have prejudice in mind, which they are unable to give up or to overcome. Ultimately, the fire dies out. They too froze to death because of the cold still clutching their logs tightly. The first stanza. Six humans trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold, each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story is told. The poem here begins on a dramatic note. The poet straightaway takes us into the midst of the action by telling us that six humans were trapped by happenstance in a place which was gloomy and bitterly cold. Each one of them had a stick of wood that belongs to him or her. Here you see the poet uses the word human. You may wonder why the poet doesn't use people, person, men, or women. Because by using the word humans, the poet wishes to convey to us that we are all equal in the eyes of the Creator. These six humans were trapped by happenstance. Happenstance means not an event that was accidental, but it was prearranged. It looked as if they were trapped by choice or accident, but it is not so. In fact, the Creator or the universal power had so arranged it. Second stanza. The dying fire in need of logs, but the first one held hers back. For of the faces round the fire, she noticed one was black. Since they were trapped, they are in need of the fire, and they started a fire with whatever they could find. But soon the fire began to die out. At this point, it was necessary to add log in order to turn the fire and keep it alive. But the first woman held her log back. She refused to give it to the fire because she saw that there was a black man among them. She could not overcome the sense of prejudice. She could not bear to see the benefit of the black man enjoying her contribution. The third stanza. The next man looking crossed away saw one not of his church, and could not bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. Here it was a turn of the next human, or a man. He looked at the people sitting around the fire, and among them he saw that there was a person who does not belong to the same religion as him. Immediately he became intolerant. he could not overcome his narrow-mindedness and religious intolerance in order to contribute his log of birchwood to the fire. Here, birch means the wood of the birch tree. The fourth stanza. The third man sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. Why should his log to be put to use to warm the idle rich? Here the third man sitting around the fire was wearing tattered clothes. Tattered means torn and worn out. He was a poor man. He saw that one of the persons sitting around the fire was a rich man. At once, he tightened his coat. He pulled it closer. He thought, why would I contribute my log to the fire that will give warmth to the rich man who is lazy and never has to work hard but only exploit the poor? He was filled with bitterness and envy and could not overcome these feelings. The fifth stanza. The rich man just sat back and thought of the wealth he had in store, and how to keep what he had earned from the lazy, shiftless poor. Here the rich man also did not give up his log of wood. He sat there, thinking of all the wealth he had accumulated. He felt that he had earned it through his consistent efforts. He did not want to waste it or wither it away. He thought, how can I safeguard the wealth from this poor person who is lazy and aimless, who has no goals and no focus? So the rich man also could not give up his prejudice, his greed and stinginess. He had more than enough, but he couldn't bring himself to share even a little of it. The sixth stanza. The blacksman's face bespoke revenge as the fire passed from his sight, for all he saw in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white. The fire is almost dying out, the black man saw this, but on his face it was clearly visible that this is the situation. The only thing he wanted was revenge for the mistreatment he had suffered at the hands of the white people. His stick of wood had the potential to revive the dying fire and save everyone's life, but he failed to see this potential. He was so blinded by hatred and thought for revenge that he only thought of using his stick to spite. Here spite means hurt, to hurt the white. The seventh stanza. The last man of this forlorn group did not accept for gain. Giving only to those who gave was how he played the game. Now it was the turn of the last man of this forlorn group. Isn't it strange that there were 6 of them, but they were forlorn? Forlorn means sad and lonely. The last man in this group, he never did anything without thinking whether it would bring benefit or profit. He had an extremely materialistic, transactional approach. He played the game of life by giving only to those who would give in something in return. He did not have the generosity or largeness of heart. He saw that the others were not given their logs. He too refused to give it to the dying fire. Their logs held tight in death's still hands was proof of human sin. They did not die from the cold without, they died from the cold within. Ultimately, the fire died out and all the 6 humans were frozen to death in the cold, even though they laid still and dead. They kept holding to their logs tightly. This shows their prejudice, greediness, bitterness, hatred, negative thoughts, extra were their sins. They had the chance to give up their sins in the fire of enlightenment, but they did not do so. Their death was not cause of the cold outside. Their death was cause of the cold inside. Here, cold outside means the weather that was outside. And the cold inside means the cold in their hearts, the selfishness, their inability to reach out to others. By holding on their sins, they did not die physically, they also died spiritually.